Hello and welcome to the Listen to This Bull live show. My name is Matt Mulholland, and we are going to be discussing bullshit from public adjusters and contractors when insurance adjusters are involved in the crap that they have to deal with on our end. So, cheers. That's what we're getting into. This is. Oh, that hurt. How many of you have sensitive teeth? I should not drink stuff with ice in it during the show. That's a terrible idea. Ow! This is the first time that we have someone from the carrier side that's going to be on the show. And I have a lot of disclaimer to do and a lot of rules to set down to make sure that we don't end up in a position where we can't have them back on the show. And this particular gentleman is a good friend of mine anyway. So we're going to be nice to him. Let me get through Arden. So the gentleman that I have in the wings is a manager of a major TPA firm. And he is someone that I have met in the field quite often in the state of Georgia when he was a field adjuster. And my wife says that I know not to chew ice. I know not to chew ice. I didn't think about it at the time. I'm sorry. What's up, Javier? So today we are going to ask this guy very reasonable questions. I've got a ton of questions for the guy anyway. Even if you guys don't post something in the commentary, then I'm going to just take over the whole thing because there's plenty that we can ask. But if you have a reasonable question for him on claims handling processes or something along those lines, or some things that he might mention as bullshit from public adjusters or contractors, and you have some commentary, keep it professional, keep it classy. We are not here to have an argument. Just like you were on site with someone, we don't want to be a bulldog. There's just no point in it. So I'm going to bring Dan on without any further ado. And if you have any questions, post it in the commentary. And if it's a good question that is reasonable without being, don't be a dick. All right. Don't be a dick. And I'll put your comment up on the screen. How about that? That's the easiest way I can say it. All right. Dan, how's it going, buddy?
Doing good. How's it been?
Doing pretty good. Although I do miss the days where I got to meet with you regularly.
Yeah. We would argue about unicorns, wouldn't we?
It's good to see you. It's been a while. We've been meeting on site. How many times have we had claims? I'm going to say against each other, just for a lack of better terms.
With each other?
With each other.
You were never my enemy, Matt. There are a few other people out there that might have been, but you were never my enemy. I don't know, 20, 30?
Quite a bit.
Maybe more than that. Maybe less than that. Maybe 5.
Yeah, I have no idea, actually. It's somewhere in between 5 and 20. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
I like it.
Dan is one of those guys that's really easy to get along with. And as a field adjuster dealing with certain types of claims, having someone that's easy to get along with always helps out. You were friendly right away, which helped me be friendly right away. A lot of times I meet with adjusters that are complete, dicks. They're dicks immediately. And you weren't. I don't remember the first time we met, though.
I do.
Do you?
It was an Atlas Chalet. And you had those giant flashlights on your belt. I was like, who's this nerd? These huge flashlights. I remember very, very vividly. No, it was great. It was absolutely great. Yeah. That was the first time we met.
Yeah, there was this one time that we were on site. And I tell this story fairly often, or at least I have since you reminded me of it. I've told it several times. But we were on site for this one roof claim, and the policyholder came outside and said something to the effect of, I thought you guys were supposed to be arguing with each other or fighting with each other.
Yeah.
So I turned to you and I said, unicorns are real.
I'm pretty sure you spiked your coffee too on the roof. It was fantastic, man. No, we had a lot of good times. I don't think we ever argued one time.
Well, we had arguments. They just weren't fights.
We had discussions, not arguments.
Well, I think that the word argument doesn't necessarily mean that there's animosity.
maybe
having an argument means each side is presenting their case and trying to persuade
Right.
the other side. That's what the term means.
Yeah.
In layman's terms, argument means a fight, because you have an argument with your wife. It means you're fighting with your wife and you're going to end up on the couch because she's going to win. So if you think about arguments, oftentimes when I think about arguments, I immediately think of dog houses for some reason. I'm conditioned to think.
Have you spent a few nights in those?
It's entirely possible. I'm neither going to confirm nor deny. My wife is watching, and she definitely could. She definitely could. And here she is. Matt loves ridiculously large and bright flashlights. I do have quite a bit of them.
You know what's funny? Is I actually, after that claim, I went out and bought my own flashlight set, exactly like you had.
Really?
I was so impressed with your large, ridiculous flashlights that I had to buy my own.
You know, it's a funny thing, but ridiculously large flashlights, like the one that I carry with me at all times, definitely help when you're talking about a wet water loss or something along those lines. I was trying to tie in a sexual innuendo to that, and I couldn't figure out how to do it, and I just went for it anyway.
Well,
it didn't work.
I found out, and here's a helpful hint, is those single bulb LED lights, for some reason, illuminate the water damage on ceilings on drywall very, very well, and they're very easy to photograph. So if you don't have them,
just the single bulb, not the ones that have multiple.
No, just a single bulb.
And you've noticed a difference between single and multiple.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
I have one with 3 and one with 4, and the single smallest one on the brightest setting provides the best illumination to photograph stains on ceilings.
That's pretty cool. So Frank Dalton taught me a trick using a cell phone, that if you turn the camera function on your cell phone, you look up, sometimes stuff will appear in the image on your phone that you can't see with the naked eye otherwise.
Huh. Maybe it's fresh or something like that.
I don't know what the difference is, but it might just be that it's catching some color differential that you just wouldn't see otherwise. So anyway. Yanni is how you pronounce this name. I remember from our previous episode. How you doing, Yanni? And Javier is
Hey, Javier.
Very good. If you guys have any questions, feel free to write them in the comments for Dan, but I do have a few specific questions that I'd like to ask before they start going crazy.
Go for it.
I need to know what is the biggest bullshit that you deal with from public adjusters regularly?
It's not necessarily one thing. It's probably a bunch of things that pile up. I mean, here's the biggest thing. The IA, no matter what firm they're with, no matter who they're working for, no matter what carrier they're working for, they're always scrutinized. They're always under the microscope, not just by PAs or lawyers, but by the carrier that they're working for, by the IA firm that they're working for, by QA teams, by their managers. They have a stack of people that are checking on them. And there's nobody necessarily checking behind the contractors and the PAs. So they can, in my experience, this comment may start a fire. I've met with PAs and contractors, and they have pointed out bird crap on a window screen and on a roof and called it hail damage.
Bird crap?
If I took a picture of that and called it bird crap, I would never work in the industry again.
What would you call it? Animal feces?
Yeah. That's what I took a photo of it and said what it was.
Avian excrement?
Yes.
That would work out just fine.
Yes. So the biggest thing is there's nobody going behind these contractors and PAs checking them. They can say and present whatever they want in whatever manner they want.
Okay. But if a carrier does the same thing, they're highly scrutinized and could be.
The IA does. I'm talking about from the IA side. Yeah.
Well, even if it's a staff adjuster, really, if you were, if anybody from the carrier side were to go out and say, if something isn't that,
Right.
or isn't damaged by hail, if it's determined later on that it is, then they're commonly construed as acting in bad faith or something along those
Correct.
lines. Like they purposely said no, that they disagreed or something along those lines.
Right.
But you've got a lot of scrutiny on you as an IA because you have the carrier and their staff taking a look at everything that you're doing.
Well, not just their staff, but our staff as well, myself included.
Eric asks, what about wind-driven birdcraft?
No.
Yeah.
If it made it all the way into the house, I might have to call an engineer out on that one.
That's a great question.
I agree. Best question in the world.
That's pretty good.
That
Can you explain what an authority level means for an adjuster?
Well, it depends on the carrier. It depends on who they're working for. You know, and I work for 15 at once. And so sometimes you have draft authority. Sometimes you don't. Most of the time you don't. So the only authority you have is to follow their guidelines. So you have none. You have to write the claim and present the claim the way that they have laid out for you in their guidelines.
What if the guidelines don't have anything to do with an insurance policy? I'm sure you get that argument a lot from public adjusters.
And what way? Give me a specific.
Okay, so estimatics inside of guidelines. All right, they talk about if you're going to write an estimate, that this is the way that you should write the estimate for something normal. Let's say it's a roof, and you're not allowed to have. I've seen some guidelines that specify in the estimatics of a roof system that they cannot put ridge cap and starter as separate line items, that that's included in the waste of the field shingles.
Okay.
So if the guidelines state that, what do you think gives the authority to the carrier to stick to their guns on that type of estimation when the policy doesn't suggest anything along those lines?
I've seen it change so many times. The IA is not allowed to write for certain things, but the desk adjuster or the carrier, they can do whatever they want. And a lot of times I've seen these estimates come back with where their guidelines say that you can't estimate for certain things, just a starter course, ridge cap, exactly like you said. And they supplement the claim and it's in there. They've changed it. So it's the IA has to adhere to the guidelines. The insurance company can do whatever they want.
So if an IA is, you work with a TPA firm, right? Where you're handling the settlement of the claim as well?
No, I'm not settling your claims. No.
Okay. So you're just handling the field work for the IA, and then it ends up with a desk adjuster at a carrier. And then they could make some kind of a different determination based on kind of supplemental information is set their way.
Correct. Any way they want.
If there is a contractor involved in the claim that has a estimate that is signed off on by the policyholder, does that change your requirement to write an estimate?
No, absolutely not. We still have to provide an estimate. A lot of times it's just, comparative estimate at that point. If this is what it's going to take and it's close enough, we've got the same amounts, dollar amount may be off by a little bit. They may ask some questions. A lot of times they'll ask questions. I'm not so sure why this contractor's wanting to put this in. Why would you put this, why would you include this in your estimate? And then you can kind of talk them through it. Especially if we're not allowed to write for those items. You can tell them, well, this is pretty standard in this area, or it's not standard. They're just trying to, pull one over on you.
Right.
I saw a boat.
Let me ask you a question before you go further on that.
Yeah.
Because you use the word comparative estimate. And in a lot of statutes, in the statutes of Georgia, comparative estimate on auto claims could come from a bona fide auto repair facility or a body shop or something along those lines.
Right.
But that is a auto body shop that has the ability to actually perform the work.
Right.
Could a comparative estimate really be written by a public adjuster or an insurance adjuster, or any kind of an adjuster, when we really don't have any authority to do so, because we don't have the ability to actually perform the work? So how could we give a comparative estimate?
Use the same programs that the carrier is using. I mean, you've got Xactimate and Stability, and you know those programs. Those programs have updates every month. Their prices change per zip code. I guess that's what you're paying for, because it can get expensive.
It is.
But that's how. That's what the carriers are using. So that's what I suggest you use, or something very comparative.
So I don't know, to be honest, I somewhat disagree with you on this.
Well,
an estimating platform gives you the option to you leave it. That's it. I'm out.
I quit.
Told you.
Told you to be nice to me.
Damn it, man.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think an estimating platform has the ability to make those repairs. So I don't know if it could be considered a comparative estimate in reality. At least it wouldn't meet the qualifications set forth under the auto section of property loss in the statutes for some states. I don't know how that would really apply. It would be able to give you a basis to put together some kind of a reserve for the claim. And I understand that most IAs are required to write some kind of an estimate, regardless of whether there's a contractor with a legitimate bid or not. But if they do have a legitimate bid, does an IA that just does the field work, not necessarily acting as a TPA in this case, just an IA firm, do you ever recommend appraisal to the carrier?
They ask us, no, we don't. They'll ask us to review estimates, review engineer reports, and within reason. At that point, if the desk adjuster requests that we review an estimate or an engineer report and make decisions, now they're giving us authority to make those decisions, where they've given us, they basically passed the torch that they have to make those decisions. And you do your best, you review it. And let me tell you, man, there is not one single PA estimate or contractor's estimate that I did not see multiple large errors in their estimates, where they would, I didn't ever looked at yours. I'm gonna never looked at one of yours. I'm just saying the ones that I was asked to look at, where they say we have a $20,000 discrepancy in here, and 19,000 of those dollars, the discrepancy dollars, were all duplicate line items in the same rooms. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, where there's nobody going behind and checking these guys.
What kind of a person do you think could do that? Do you think that there should be like a third party reviewer of public adjusters' estimates before they're submitted?
I think everybody's estimate should be reviewed, no matter whose it is. If I were to go out and write a claim, even as a manager, it would be under the same scrutiny as anybody out there. Because here's the cold hard facts. As an adjuster, you are managing the carrier's guidelines. You may have 10, 50, just say the 5 claims that you did that day are all different. All the carrier guidelines are different. Okay. So you have to manage those guidelines. You have to manage the estimatic guidelines. You have to manage the reported guidelines. And then you have to accurately estimate in Xactimate, in Stability, whatever it is, without making any mistakes. It is absolutely impossible. They're to be 100% all the time. It's absolutely impossible to be 100% all the time. I review my own claims when I did it. I would look at it just like the reviewer would look at it, just like the carrier would look at it, and double check myself. And I'll tell you what, I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of easy, dumb mistakes. And I'm not saying that these people did it on purpose. Maybe they just forgot to delete it.
I mean, we've had errors in our estimates over the years many times.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever went through any of our estimates with you on site while you and I met on site.
I think
But plenty of times I have done that with other IAs anyway, and marked out my own shit because like,
yeah,
my guy definitely messed up on this. I'm sorry, I'm going to take this out. I'll send you an updated version.
Yeah.
But everybody makes often common mistakes. I think it's a mistake for a public adjuster or a contractor that's dealing with this to automatically assume that that mistake was done on purpose.
Absolutely. And from the IA side to the PA or contractor side, I mean, the biggest thing in this, in our, or I'm going to say relationship, in our dealings with each other, I assume the best of you from the beginning, guarded, but I assumed the best of you from the beginning, and you proved to be a reliable, pretty stand-up guy. And so, but not everybody's like that. But we can, I think it was Reagan that said, trust but verify. We still need to verify. And we still need to make sure that, go ahead.
Huh. He said, give them the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not just PAs, but contractors and adjusters. Man, when it comes down to it, we're all just people. You don't know what happened that morning in the adjuster's life or the contractor's life. You know, could have lost a parent, could have, you know, just had a really bad hangover.
There's definitely always something that could be. I teach public adjusters in my PA 101 class at the National Claims Institute to give adjusters the ability to correct any mistakes and make the assumption that it is a mistake. I know it's easy to assume as a PA or a contractor that these carriers are constantly trying to screw them over. But if they give them the option to make that change as if it was an honest mistake, more often than not, that change will be made. But if they go at it like, how dare you fucking make this issue again? We've had this discussion every single time, or you're acting in bad faith, or I'm going to sue your ass, whatever it is. How can you possibly respond to that without some kind of an admittance that you did it on purpose? If you were to suddenly pay for it, it's as if you're agreeing that you did that on purpose and they caught you. Would your legal department ever allow you to do such a thing? Probably not. But if they said honest mistake and they let it up like that, then you could easily claim, yeah, oh, you're right. It was an honest mistake. Here's the change.
Right. That's what supplements are for. It's called an estimate for a reason. You know what I mean? It's not an exact. I know the program's called that, but it's not an exactimate. I mean, it's not going to be exact to the penny.
Now, there's no way. There's too many different ways to make repairs to something for every estimate. There's one PA that teaches courses in another place that often says that there's exactly one accurate estimate. And if they don't pay that exact amount, then they're wrong. But I highly disagree with that. There's many different ways to skin a cat. There's many different ways to repair a property. And an estimating process or a program isn't going to be able to show all of those. And every different repair firm is going to estimate things differently based on their own internal practices and procedures. Well, so Remington, my co-host, was on and will be on here, and he's posted a comment. I wish I was there to meet Daniel. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, sir. I will say that before I became an independent adjuster, I was in construction for a long time. I did residential, built, framed, down to trim carpentry. I worked for a commercial construction company for a long time. Was a carpenter's foreman. I ran a cabinet shop, and then I ran some pretty large commercial projects. So I know the processes of construction pretty well. And it was always funny to me when a contractor or a PA would tell me, well, you can't do that. And I've done it
You
before.
can't do that.
There's so many things you can do, and you wouldn't believe. So you're right, Matt. I said all that to say this. It's okay to be wrong. It's good to keep an open mind, because maybe just maybe you'll learn something, and maybe change your point of view on things. And I think that's why we got along. We always have gotten along, is the discussions or arguments or disagreements that we've had. Both you and I have always kept our minds open to the other's point of view. And I think maybe once or twice we've said, you know what, we're going to have to agree to disagree. But I think we settled most of them. So I think that's a big one.
More often than not, it was, if there was an argument, it was left to be a supplemented item or something along those lines.
Yes. Yep.
I got a good question in the comments here. I'm going to post real quick from Hank Messer. He's a public adjuster. At the end of the day, the estimating software is just a tool to estimate the damages. The final cost incurred is what the policyholder is owed, minus the deduct. When the carrier uses these tools as the end-all amount of loss, I have a problem. Now, I know you don't end up settling claims this way generally, because it's usually in a desk adjuster's hands if there is a difference in the final estimate. Do you have any issues with this comment?
No, I agree with it. Because you could get Three-Finger Bob to replace your damaged cabinets, right? I knew a Three-Finger Bob, by the way. And he was the best cabinet maker out there, honestly. And he would do the best work out there, and it would be fantastic.
The ladies loved him.
You would pay way more for it. The problem lies in, how do I say this? Some people live in a Waffle House and they want it remodeled to a Ruth Chris Steakhouse.
Okay.
So there needs to be the LKQ is very important. It's very important, right? And then you have the guys out there that are just out there. They just turn as fast as they can, and that's how they make their money. They low bid them. They do a terrible job. You got to find the middle ground, and the worst part of it is most of the time you get the latter of the two, and the insured gets screwed on both ends, where they get shoddy work, and maybe they don't get all of it paid for by the carrier.
Yeah. If I can say this, there is something to be said, Hank, from a policy standpoint. You're right. The amount that's owed is the amount that is incurred. But if the contractor started with a contingency contract that said that we'll do the work for the amount that the insurance company approves, you're kind of putting the onus on the insurance company to decide what to approve.
Right.
So if you're dealing with it from that standpoint, then the carrier doesn't really have anything. There's no bad faith going on. It's not inappropriate for them to set the amount of loss if the contractor specifically wrote that into their contract as who gets to make that determination. So something to keep in mind.
Here's an example in my life. Bought a new car not too long ago. It's got a fancy safety system in it. Big old rock came up, broke the windshield 2 or 3 months into owning it. And my insurance company wanted to pay for a aftermarket glass. And I wasn't going to have that, period, because the safety features and all that, they're made to go through a certain amount of thickness of glass. But anyways, they ended up replacing it with like, kind, and quality. And that's the kicker there. A lot of times when claims are, a loss is incurred, the insured is benefiting greatly. They're getting new floors or new cabinets, or the value of their home is going to go up. They're actually benefiting from this. I also wanted to was it Hank that asked that question?
Yeah.
I think it's more important than a dollar amount is the scope. Agreement on scope of work is a big deal. Go ahead, Matt.
No, you're absolutely right. And especially in a state like Georgia where scope is contested as a non-appraisable item, which is it. Do you do only work in Georgia, by the way?
No, I've worked in other states. No, I manage most of the coastal states in the South and Midwest.
Okay. Well,
Southwest.
either way. So you're right, though. I mean, if we argue about a scope, if you have a discussion about the scope of work and there's a difference of scope of work that's necessary, I think it makes sense that a contractor would have more authority to set a scope of work than an adjuster, even if that adjuster has experience in that.
Yes.
I have experience in roofing. I have a lot of experience in roofing. I would argue that I have more expertise in roofing than most roofers, but I'm a public adjuster. If I were to make a statement of my opinion on whether or not something is repairable, it doesn't hold as much weight as a statement of that kind of opinion from the contractor who's going to perform the work. Same thing for the adjuster that might have experience as a cabinet maker with a kitchen loss that includes cabinets. You might have a good opinion. You might be right about it, but your opinion doesn't hold nearly as much weight as an expert as it would if you were to have a current cabinet maker make that same opinion.
I agree that I think it's important that we agree on what is damaged at the moment of the inspection of the loss, and be open to the fact that more damage will be uncovered. What are you laughing at? More damage will be uncovered.
This is a common issue that we talk about.
Will be uncovered during repairs, and unless the adjuster goes back out, it's on the contractor to document well. I think it's just as important for the contractor to document as it is for the adjuster to document. If they're pulling out a cabinet and it's damaged and there's damage behind it and they keep going and keep going and keep going, keep taking pictures until you don't find damage. And that's really important. What were you going to say, Matt?
That the comment of whether or not the repairs are going to cause more damage is something that we deal with as public adjusters and contractors constantly.
Well,
we'll often get the denial of we only owe for direct physical loss, so we're not going to pay for any consequential damages that happen during the repairs that are unavoidable. But obviously, direct physical loss includes those things. They just don't know that, and it's a matter of the adjusters not getting the training that they need for it.
I think you misunderstood what I said.
No, you said the right thing. You just made me smile because you brought up that particular topic.
Well, there's certain states that have matching laws and they have percentage rules where, a certain amount of the roof can be damaged and then you have to replace the whole thing. So fortunately, I don't work for one of those carriers. And I don't believe that to my knowledge, none of my files ever went to litigation.
I need to point out something. Never? Not one?
Never, not one. And
what was your rating at your firm?
Number 1A.
You're kidding. And it never went to litigation?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually
to my knowledge. Now, I don't know. To my knowledge, I was never summoned at nothing. I never was summoned.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, you wouldn't know unless they were trying to depose you or something along those lines.
Right.
But I would imagine your legal department, if they were notified that it was being sued, that they would at least contact you and notify you.
They would, yeah.
So I'm surprised. I'm not surprised because of the way you handle claims. It's easy to work with you. So it would be hard for someone to want to sue you specifically or a claim that you're involved in. You're one of the better ones that I've dealt with, which is why we've remained friends over the years.
Yeah.
But let me say this to my commentators real quick. I'm going to post the question that I'm not going to actually ask you, but I just want people to understand the reason I'm not posting their questions. If you put 2 question marks after your question, it comes across as you being like, what the fuck, man? Why is he talking about? I'm not going to ask your questions if you're going to ask them like that. So just one question mark, and it might seem a little bit more reasonable in the way that you're
No,
asking
man,
it.
no, that doesn't offend me at all. So
It doesn't?
that goes down to carrier guidelines, what
We'll
they're,
post.
yeah.
So he's asking about, for people that are listening to this and don't get to see the screen, Daniel was, what about discontinued roofing materials that cannot be repaired? Are you guys instructed to ignore that, even when we present an NTS report? Real quick, do you know what an NTS report is? All right, so you haven't even seen one yet. So there's a new ITEL out called NTS.
Oh yeah.
You have seen that?
Yes, I have.
Have you guys been instructed to ignore those or anything like that?
No.
Is there any guidelines? Well, I know I can ask you about that, but
right. So we want our adjusters to be able to identify products. That is the number one. I think that's the biggest thing in training. Be able to identify discontinued shingles. Be able to identify types of flooring, quality of cabinets,
right,
everything. I mean, you've got to be able to identify the items that you're estimating for, and if you can't identify the discontinued items, you need some schooling, because we know that they're out there and that they need to be properly estimated for. What you got, Matt?
You'd like a breath of fresh air, man. This is shit that seems so obvious, but we deal with the complete opposite all the time. And you're right, they need schooling.
Let me explain something.
Yeah.
And most of you might know this, but most adjusters get paid more the higher their estimate goes. So
I don't know if that's so true of other IA firms anymore.
No, it is. It absolutely is, because the carriers put out their fee schedules. Okay. And it's always on a schedule, at least the ones that I've worked for, and I've worked for a lot. So absolutely. When I was an adjuster and I could tell from Google Maps that it was a discontinued shingle, I got excited because I knew I was going to make some money on this claim. But the adjuster has a lot of power, whether they realize it or not. They can make things look a certain way. They can take photographs in a certain way. They can say things are damaged when they're not. They can do a lot of things. So it's my opinion. I can't wait for these. Comments.
It should be interesting. Yeah.
I'll just say it's true about me. I had to be the most honest person on that claim, no matter what. Because if I made a bunch of bad calls, if I was calling things damaged that was not damaged, or if I misidentified products, I wasn't reliable, and so they would find somebody else to use that was honest and could identify the item. So basically, I'm saying all that to say, you have to know your stuff. You have to know your products. You have to know how to estimate for things. You have to know the process of repairs. And you have to be the most honest person as an IA out there, because if you're not, you're going to lose your job and nobody's going to work with you. And then you have to go to the dark side and become a PA or a contractor.
Yeah. Nah, that's a terrible way to go.
I'm joking.
It's funny, but both sides call the other side the dark side.
I know. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, you and I have had discussions about water losses in the past, and I definitely wanted to ask you some questions about that.
Absolutely.
And the vast majority of my audience is a roofer or PA that deal mostly with roof claims. So I may end up losing some of these people as a result, but I encourage them to hang in there, because it does tend to actually, we already lost like 5 the second I said water loss. Go figure.
It's your problem.
If there is a water loss and someone goes out there to stabilize the loss before you have your adjustment, is there a point where they can go overboard, and what does that mean for the policyholder?
Man, yes, absolutely. And I have a lot of experience with that. For the IA, it just means that you document everything, and you document it well. You document the actual damages, and then you document the excess of mitigation, and then you're just honest. You say, you know, this is excessive mitigation. It should. Now, most mitigation companies, to my knowledge, make the insured or their client sign a piece of paper that says if the insurance company doesn't pay for this, you're going to pay for this. But a lot of times, what's that?
Definitely puts you in a pickle, though, because it's not the policyholder's fault. They
Right.
relied on a legitimate contractor to perform whatever work they deemed to be required.
So most of the time, in my experience with most carriers, this is not a blanket statement. As long as the adjuster lays things out in a way that the desk adjuster carrier can understand and see who's liable for what, they can subrogate against that contractor. They can pay for that and subrogate against them. They may choose not to subrogate against them. They may have been on a preferred contractors list that was sent out by the insurance company, and now they're no longer on that. So, I mean, there's consequences for everything, right?
Sure.
So my policy is just be honest and do what you know is right. And then if you get more out of it, you do, and keep moving on, because you'll make more money in the long run.
I definitely have a few people in here that just love to dig in a little bit here.
Go for it. If I can talk about it, I will. If I can't.
Javier. So it seems like there's a policy, and then there's the adjuster guidelines. You know,
so
let me soften this one a little bit.
No,
not that it needs to be softened, because it's a good question. But let me add on to it at least. You know, in carrier guidelines, often there's some rule of thumbs that are applied with a guideline. But it's a guideline, which, like a rule of thumb, means that there's going to be exceptions. There are times when we deal with adjusters that are unwilling to make the appropriate exceptions because they're afraid that they're going to lose their job, or that they're going to get a different rating, or something along the way. He added respectfully.
No, that's a good question, man. So how do I talk about this? So absolutely, there's a policy, and then there's the guidelines. But the policy is the Bible, basically. If the policy covers it, then it covers it. But that's up to the carrier to determine. You have to understand that these adjusters, these IAs especially, now there's a big difference between IAs and staffers, but the IAs, they can't necessarily go outside of their guidelines, because this is what the carrier has told them to do. But it doesn't mean that they cannot document what you're saying. And I think that's where a big misconception comes in. And I don't think I ever dealt with this with you, Matt, but I did with a lot of other contractors and PAs, where they would tell me, well, this is damage and this is damage and this needs to be done. I'm like, well, you show me, you point it out, you mark the shingle, you put your finger down here and point exactly what you're talking about, because ultimately it's not the IA's decision, right? They can only document the damages that they're seeing at the time. But they can also, and a lot of adjusters don't do this, but they can also document the concerns of the PA or the contractor and the insured, which is very, very important, because they're the ones that pay all of our bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's being willing to take those 15, 20 extra photos and tell them that it's bird crap on a shingle. You're just building a case against them, you know. But if there's a legitimate concern and it's outside of your guidelines as an IA, it is your job to document it and tell the desk adjuster, this is a concern. This could be supplemental. I just can't write for it right now. You know,
I think it's important to note that as an IA that's writing an estimate, you're not settling the claim. Correct. You're writing an estimate based on your guidelines. That doesn't mean that is the final amount of the claim. And it doesn't mean, you know, once the cost becomes incurred, you know, the policy will state that they will pay the lesser of the following: the amount of the policy limits, the amount actually and necessarily incurred, or the amount to repair or replace the damaged part of the dwelling, or something along those lines. It'll say one of three different options like that. You have to write an estimate because that's part of your job. The contractor is actually going to say what the actual cost is once they have agreed to a scope of damages. Your estimate doesn't matter that much in reality, other than it sets the ACV value.
Sets ACV, and reserves. It sets the reserve.
And sets a reserve. So if your estimate is low because of your guidelines, it sets the reserve lower or artificially lower than it should be. It is harder to overcome that as a PA, because then we have to get a manager to approve increasing the reserve if it is much lower than it should be. So setting that reserve can be a little bit of a detriment if you're sticking within guidelines that really shouldn't be there. And there are definitely some estimatics that don't make any sense.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that.
But outside of that, it's not like you're saying, no, this is not what we're ever going to pay. It just means that you're writing the estimate that meets within your guidelines as an IA, and now it's up to a desk adjuster to end up paying the final costs associated with the fully incurred costs by the policyholder. I do think, though, that if you're setting the reserves and you're setting the ACV value artificially low because your estimate meets certain guidelines that don't actually look like what a legitimate or bona fide contractor would write, it doesn't really make sense. But
I agree with that statement.
Your job.
I agree with that statement, but I'll just tell you guys, because you don't have to deal with it. The amount of crap that I've had to wade through that was just absolute bull was unbelievable. I mean,
can you give us some examples?
I did earlier, but I'll tell you. This guy, I had a lot of run-ins with him. Finally, it came to a head, and I think maybe he got what he deserved. I hope that he did, because he defrauded a lot of people, I believe. But one time I showed up for a water claim in the basement of this person's house. Guess what he did? Tore up some flooring in the first floor. Why? Well, because it was continuous through all the first floor. That's a big paycheck for him. That's not okay. It's hard to go into these without giving a lot of specifics, but bird crap and ripping up and smashing cabinets when they didn't need to be, when all that was wrong with it was a toe kick. Handed me an estimate. If you were a PA or a contractor and you said, you know what, I sketched this out, I'll send you the file. And I'm like, you know what, just print it out for me. I got to make sure it's correct. And you print it out and you hand it to me. My first measurement is 3 inches off, or it doesn't even look like the room that it's supposed to represent. Sorry, man. We have to sketch within the closest inch. If you're 1.5 feet or 3 inches wrong, you've lost all credit to me, because that's the easiest part of the job.
If
it goes on and on.
What if their laser tool is just not calibrated or something?
It's called a tape measure, brother.
My tape is wrong, man. It's in metric. Damn it.
I'm sure it's a setting on Xactimate.
Yeah. Yeah. Chad, one of the students in my class right now, dealing with absolute bull is on both sides. Depends on the adjuster, not the chosen side. I think that's true. Absolutely. I think there's bull on both sides. And I want to acknowledge, and the whole purpose of me having you on here, and I'm so glad that you were allowed to. Your firm actually allowed you to be on this show, which blows my mind, by the way. But the fact that they were willing to do that just goes to show how great a company they are. And I almost got hired by the same company. I'm not going to say the name of the company because I'm not supposed to. But they almost hired me once. So they must have good taste.
I like our company. I think we do a good job. I think especially the company that I work for, I wouldn't work for them if I didn't believe that they were indemnifying the policyholder properly. That's how I got my nickname, Indemnity Dan.
Is that your nickname?
It used to be.
Does your wife call you that at night? Yeah.
No comment.
Yeah, let's make it pre-law, Stan. Come on. Chad also brings this point up, and I think it's good because we're talking about guidelines quite a bit in this. And I think the guideline issue is somewhat of a strong subject for a lot of people because that is the biggest issue that we come across when we're arguing line items anyway. Whether or not the guideline allows for something or not, in certain circumstances, doesn't matter. But an IA, especially one that is licensed, they're licensed to determine what they believe, if they're going to write an estimate, what they believe is the true amount of loss, regardless of what the guidelines might indicate that they're allowed to write for. But what most public adjusters don't really understand, an insurance adjuster, an IA that is licensed, also has to abide by the requirements of their client, that whoever's hiring them. So you are obligated as an IA to look out for the best interest of your client. And that isn't necessarily the policyholder.
I don't know about that. That statement. Just so you know, when we're graded, we get audited every year. And we get graded, and we have to be within a certain percentage point of the accurate estimate of the settled claim. And we are graded on overpayments and underpayments. They want us to be as close to the true dollar amount as possible.
But they mean true dollar amount using their guidelines, though, right?
I think there's too much. I think there's a lot of emphasis put on guidelines incorrectly here. Okay.
There might be. So maybe we can figure out what the problem is.
Yeah. Most guidelines are, we want you to handle this situation this way. We want you to handle this situation this way. We want you to estimate for these items in this manner. You can write for X, Y, and Z if these things are damaged. It doesn't stop you if, say, framing, if there's some framing that's damaged and needs to be replaced, it doesn't stop you from estimating for it. The only thing that can stop you from estimating for it is if you can see it or not. Do we know it's actually damaged? That's the only thing that I can think of, and the only reason I would not estimate for something that is actually damaged. I can go into more about that, but that's my opinion. If you'd like for me to,
I mean,
framing.
If we can uncover the real difference between guidelines, I'm going to give you another example that might bring in my audience a little bit more. If you've got, let's talk about overhead and profit as part of a guidelines. Most guidelines. I didn't
hear what you say.
Overhead and profit. Let's talk about overhead and profit as part of the guidelines.
OMP. Let's do it.
If the guidelines say that you can pay for overhead and profit if it's reasonably likely that a general contractor would be used, then you can pay for it up front. Or if it's questionable, then you'd only pay it if a general contractor is used. But then there's this concept of complexity that comes in that might be coming from the guidelines as well. So if there's something along those lines, when is it appropriate for you not to estimate for it when a general contractor is involved from the beginning and you're aware they're a general contractor?
So I think that comes down to training, honestly. Okay. I think also there needs to be some leeway given to people, what people call, what they say they need O&P for. You could have two the exact same claims, just say in the great state of Florida, right? Exactly the same damages, exact same house, and one would constitute O&P and one would not. Say minor damages, homeowner lives there, they can get somebody to do the work, no issue. Well, say the other one's a snowbird and they live in New York half the year. There's a contractor is going to be needed. Somebody's going to have to give them access to the house. Somebody's going to have to schedule everything and get the work done. So it absolutely, in my opinion, depends on the claim itself and the circumstances that surround the claim.
But you don't get to
And I think
use your
O&P
opinion,
is
though.
abused, absolutely abused, because every single estimate, I'm dead serious, every single estimate I've ever looked at from a contractor has O&P on it, whether it's needed or not.
That's true.
And so I want to say this before. I wanted to say it before we were talking about roofs. I was down in Florida, and we were taking a charter boat out, and I walked by this guy. He said hi to me, and I looked at the name of his boat, and it said One More Square, and it was a really nice boat. And I asked him, I said, "Hey man, I'm an adjuster, and then does that have anything to do with roofing?" He goes, "Yeah. I bought this boat from adding 1 square to every roof and charge it to the insurance company." So, I mean, every day.
Imagine, I'm about to be a dick, by the way. Imagine if an insurance carrier were to decide to write in their guidelines that they're not going to pay for ridge cap outside of the guidelines, so that they took away that difference from field waste to ridge cap on every single claim, like taking one olive
Yeah,
out
absolutely.
of the jar. How much money they would save?
It's huge on both sides, because
Yeah.
the volume of claims that the carrier is paying out is gigantic. $1 on each claim is huge. It's the same. It's the same on the contractor side. It's
Yeah,
the
that's
exact
true.
same on the contractor side.
So if you're constantly seeing overhead and profit on every single claim, even from people that aren't general contractors, on single trades that aren't even licensed trades in some states, then it frustrates you as an IA, because now you have to tell someone that no. Do you like telling people no?
No, because it's automatic. It's what they assume you're gonna say from the beginning. I mean,
You ever have someone start cursing at you because their
absolutely,
contractor or PA just got them all riled up before you showed up?
absolutely.
You ever had someone take
Absolutely.
a swing at you?
No, I had somebody take a ladder. They
Really?
left.
They left you on a roof?
Mm-hmm.
Did you start using your own ladder right after that?
Yeah, no. It was a 3-story house. It was huge. There was no way for me to get up there, but he came back.
After coaxing, was there police involved?
No, absolutely not. I mean,
I've
I almost
heard.
called him. That's how I got him back.
Okay. I'll pay for it, I swear. Bring me the
No,
ladder.
no. Look, I'm not argumentative. The way that I did roof claims, the way that I did every claim, is I learned very quickly that if I left things out, I was doing everybody disservice. Meaning, if a roofer got up there with me and I was doing a roof claim and he was saying all this was hail damage or whatever, and I didn't agree with him, there's no reason for me not to document it, because he's the insured's representative on that roof. Whether or not he's a PA, that's what he is. And
Right.
ultimately, I'm not making the decision. I'm not paying the check. So just document it. Who cares? Who cares? It's not worth an argument. It's not worth going down and to the insured and saying, we didn't agree, but so screw him. No, we didn't agree, but I documented his concerns, and we're going to let the carrier know what's going on. And that's it. It's all it boils down to.
I'm surprised it took this long to get this question from someone. I'm going to
Bring
post
it.
up Lori. Hey, Lori. What about the fact that O&P is figured into the premium? Doesn't it make it prepaid on any claim? Can I answer this one?
It's a blanket statement. Yeah, go ahead.
O&P might be figured into the premium because a general contractor would be required to replace the dwelling as a whole. If it ever had to be replaced, it'd be part of a replacement cost of the entire dwelling. That doesn't necessarily mean the replacement cost of individual components of it would necessarily need to have a general contractor involved. So that's a silly argument. What do you
Can I
think,
give
Dean? Yeah.
my thoughts on when a GC is needed, or an O&P would
Yeah.
actually apply? Do you mind?
Please do. Actually, that's a great idea.
This is my opinion, so it really has.
This does not represent the opinions or facts of any of the companies that Dan works
No.
for, has worked for, or will work for in the future.
As an IA,
His wife doesn't even agree with him.
that's right. Hardly ever. Anyway, no. So I'm looking at, do we have trades that need to be scheduled around each other? Do we have plumbing that needs to be stubbed out, and then they need to come back to do the finish plumbing, the fixtures and stuff like that? Like, do we have painters and cabinets and flooring that go in an order that needs a professional that knows what they're doing to hire and schedule these trades? That's what I looked at. It's the way I
That
looked at it.
sounds like the exact opinion of a lot of carriers. Let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
Does it matter if the insured is 80 years old?
Absolutely.
Because they wouldn't necessarily be able to know if a subcontractor is worthwhile or not, having somebody else handle that for them. What if there is, I got a better question.
I have the best story for you. Go ahead and ask it.
Well, shit, now I want the story first.
No, ask the question and I'll tell you the story.
What if there is a relative that's handling claim on behalf of their parents? Would they be able to get paid as a general contractor for working with the scheduling?
I've never been asked that question. That's a good question.
I've never asked the question.
Anytime I have had an insured do anything that was outside of a normal that you would pay a contractor to do, indemnified the insured on that for their time. Absolutely. If they moved a tree that was over a covered structure, if a tree fell on their driveway and they needed to get out and they cut it up, absolutely, I paid them for their time because the insurance company was going to pay them someone to do it anyways, but they had to do it themselves. That's a really good question. I don't know about that.
I think it would fall along the same lines of what you just said, though. I think it would.
It would depend on the state, and it would depend on the licensing.
Right.
I personally, I don't know if I would ever ask for that. If I ever handled a claim to my parents,
you don't want to get fired?
You're just, I don't know. Maybe I have a better relationship with my parents, but I'm doing it because I love my parents, not because I want to get paid for it. You know what I mean? But I'm sure that question has come up before, but I do not know the answer to that.
So what was the story you were going to say?
So I literally wanted to cry the third time I went out to this house. No joke. The male insured was blind and the female insured was paralyzed from the waist down. And I went out. The roof was in shambles. I paid for the roof the first time I was there, or I suggested that payment should be, they should pay for the roof, paid for all the interior damages. Went back a year later because there was more damage on the ceiling. And I went up on the roof, and guess what? Somebody took the check and didn't do the work.
Oh, no.
There was no way for them to know. I had to stand there and tell them that I'm so sorry, but the people you gave that money to did not repair your roof, and they were out of business. It was a year later, they were out of business. So there's nothing that I can do. I will send in my report. The desk adjuster will review it, but there's nothing that I can do. The third time I went out there, ceiling was collapsing, just mold everywhere. And I got the most, it made me want to punch the contractor in the face. And it also made me want to cry that somebody would do this to these people. But the the contractor's like, man, I just want to help these people. I just want to do this, that, and the other. And I'm holding it in the bank that I've already been here twice and I know what's going on. So I go do my inspection. He keeps saying that, I just want to help these people. I just want to do what's right for these people, blah, blah, blah.
Same contractor that was there before?
No, different contractor.
Okay.
3 different contractors. Went in to talk to the insured, and I said, hello, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. And they said, well, hi, Dan. It's good to see you again. And the contractor was not very happy. And I looked at him. I said, this is your opportunity to help these people. And I went through. I was like, nothing's been done. This is the 3rd time I've been here, and your roof has still not been replaced. And it's terrible. This is the reality of what happens to people out there. And it, that was an extreme. That was a real extreme. I hope that somebody helped them. I personally put them in contact after I knew the claim was over and gone. I put them in contact with some people that I know that give roofs away after so many roofs are sold. And I believe that they were taken care of. So I'm glad. Just know that no matter what the worst is you've had from an insurance company, there has been the same or worse from the contractors out there.
You just told a great story. And I don't think I could ever work from your side of the table for the very reason that it's hard for you to defend your position when this is what you get after a story like that. It's unfortunate, Daniel, but was the roof paid in full for the contractor's price? Javier, in his mind, is probably still blaming you for all of that.
Yeah. And so it doesn't matter. Any contractor worth their weight can go out there and start the work and do it, and then supplement the work. I mean, as a contractor myself at one point, I was working for contracting companies for a long time. The good contractors have the money to float while they're getting paid. And there's a process to this. And
let me stipulate before we go much further on that, because that is going to be policy specific. There are certain policies that do not allow you to make any kind of permanent repairs until the amount of loss is either agreed to,
right,
or an appraisal award is submitted.
In this case, it was not like that. In this case, it was not like that. And they didn't, to my knowledge, and looking in the prior claims, the person who did it did not file for any kind of supplement. They did not file for the ACV. And actually, I believe that.
Did they recover depreciation and then run away with that?
No, they didn't. But we recovered it for them. That was the only thing that we could do.
You paid them the depreciation even though the work wasn't performed.
I told them what had happened, and that their ceilings needed to be fixed and all this other stuff needed to happen, and the desk adjuster and the company that these people were insured by made the business decision to release ACV and then some to these people and actually help them out quite a bit.
Well, they should have paid out the ACV anyway, though, right? But by doing additional amounts on top of that.
ACV is once the repairs are made. So
are you talking about? Well, ACV is paid out.
RCV. I'm sorry. RCV.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was saying ACV. I'm so sorry.
So if they release depreciation and then some on top of that without the work being performed, that's actually great.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. That's a carrier actually having a policyholder in good hands.
Yeah. And it wasn't that way.
My audience wants to fight you.
That's fine. Throw some up there. Let's talk.
You want some good ones? All right. Chad, O&P has not included individual line items in Xactimate. All trades require some form of additional O&P required to create work and estimates. Why do most IAs seem to disagree with this? I disagree with it, not just IAs. there's not general contractor overhead and profit in individual line items Xactimate, and that's true, and you'll see that on the white paper in Xactimate, but there is profit in the line items for the tradesman. So unless you're a general contractor, then you are making profit with the Xactimate line item amounts.
O&P is only for management.
Management of the claim from a general contractor that's subbing out.
Correct. So it would be your project manager or your, something like that. Somebody to manage the project off-site or on-site.
Or coordinate things.
Something like that. That's right. What pays their salary.
Now, I mean, there are fees for supervisor hours and things like that that are in Xactimate. I don't know if overhead and profit is really designed to cover project managers and things along those lines, but it is designed to cover a company that would have a project manager or things along those lines.
Right. Yeah.
But the tradesman, if it's a roof only, and I think that's what most of these people would end up being dealing with. Although Chad specifically does water losses more often than not.
Okay.
But if it's let's say it's a water loss and there's just a dry out going on before the rebuild, does a restoration company that isn't a general contractor is not going to do the rebuild, or they really owe general contractor overhead and profit?
It's a good question. I mean, if they're going out multiple times and you've got one guy going out there to take readings and everything, and he can do his job on his own, and you don't have somebody behind him, I mean, scheduling and doing all that other stuff, there's no reason for O&P.
What if, I'm so glad you said what you said a few minutes ago. You said overhead and profit is for the management, the coordination, that kind of stuff for the claim, right? So public adjuster should totally get paid overhead and profit.
I didn't say claim. You said claim. What I'm talking about is the rebuild. It's not the claim. It's the rebuild. It's the reconstruction of the loss.
I as a public adjuster, I can tell you often I'm coordinating the efforts of these contractors and making sure that they're doing the right thing. So then you need to get your
contractor's license and just start doing it yourself, and then you can get paid O&P.
But come on.
I mean, it's fine. Look, there's so many gray areas, and you can't make insurance is one of those places, those industries. You can't make blanket statements usually, especially in the gray areas. They are so loss specific. It's unbelievable. Again, one claim could have be justified with O&P, and another claim absolutely not. Same exact loss, same exact damages, different circumstances. That's just the way it is.
Do you have time to go over? This is normally just a 1 hour show, but
let's do it.
The audience is actually participating, and this is a good
one. My wife's already mad at me. There's nothing that you could do to make it any worse. I'm joking.
I have a few different questions that, Lori, that's 3 question marks in a row. Imagine what it is that I read that as, just 10 and 10 for overhead and profit. How long has it been like that? That doesn't really even matter.
It depends. It also depends on what part of the country you're in.
A lot of that 10 and 10 stuff, honestly, has come from, again, a lot of the contingency contract things that go on that allow the carrier to make some kind of determination over what the amount of loss is, because you've given them the right to do so if you're using a contingency contract as a contractor. If you're a contractor watching this, stop using contingency contracts and start setting the amount of loss and telling the insured that that's how much you owe for, regardless of whether the carrier pays. And you'll actually get your estimates paid for without having to worry about whether the carrier is going to argue with your line items.
This is the actual cost. This is what's funny to me is people are arguing O&P on a roof when they make 40% to 55% profit anyways on that roof. That's ridiculous to me. My brother owns a roofing company in another state, and I know how much profit he makes, and it's ridiculous. So the fact that you're fighting for O&P, what do you want to make 65% profit? Go for it.
To be honest, and it depends. It must be depending on the state. What state is he in? I have a guy in the wings that he's dying to talk about what you just. Let me say this: my audience is saying right now, because they're about to murder you.
You're breaking up really bad. They're about to murder me.
Am I? Oh yeah, they might murder you any second. But hang on a second. Let my internet come back. Any second now. I wonder why it's so slow suddenly.
It's because they're about to murder me.
They might be. Suddenly everybody's probably putting a bunch of shit in there. I got a guy in the wing that I constantly call neck tattoo because he's got a neck tattoo, go figure, and he suddenly can't sit still. So if you, if you're stating that they make 65% or more in profit, in reality, they might make something like that on a per claim basis, but the average claim, they're definitely not making that. And it's because they get beaten up and the amount of hours that they put in on somebody. If you make a blanket statement about how much profit a roofing contractor might make, it could depend on the state and in certain circumstances. I'm probably breaking up again, aren't I?
You are. I'm really trying to listen to you. You saw my confused face. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm just talking about per roof. I understand. Look, I understand. Believe me, I understand.
There's averages, and if a
Absolutely.
contractor makes a decent profit on one, they might make absolute shit on another, and it has to average out in order for them to be able to make money long term. There is that sentiment, and I think that this is true on both sides. The sentiment on our side is that the misconception is that carriers make decisions on claims, and it's not a mistake. It's on purpose to pay out as little as possible. And they underbid things on purpose. And it's entirely possible that they set those guidelines in such a way for you to do that. And on your side, you might make the comment, adjusters often make the mistake of assuming that because the contractor has written a bid for a ridiculous amount, that they're trying to make a shit ton of money per claim in order to put their kid through college for that one single claim or something along those lines. And I've heard that comment over the years multiple times.
To be honest with you, for me at least, it's I get frustrated because we're expected to be perfect, or excuse me, the IA is expected to be perfect, and it's okay for everybody else to make mistakes, and it would just bother me that the mistakes are so huge. How can you not know that you made these? And the person was completely discredited in my mind at that point. Not that they made it on purpose or not. It was just learn how to do your job, learn how to do it well, and don't send me ridiculous overbid crap. Like literally, it's unbelievable. What, you didn't think I was going to notice that you triple charged me for this one line item? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But look, I know great contractors. I know great PAs. You're the only one. But I know great contractors. I know great roofers. I know.
That can't be true.
There's
got to be other PAs you deal with.
I would say a lot of things just to get a reaction or be funny.
Yeah.
But it goes back to just assuming the best of people and not assuming that everybody is just out to get you, because I have never met I've never met an IA that didn't want to get paid, and I've never met a contractor or a PA that didn't want to get paid. Right? So the IA wants the estimate to go as high as possible inside the guidelines that he's given, or the policy or the damages, and the contractor and the PA wants that claim to go as high as absolutely possible. So that's the one thing that we can all say that we agree on.
How often do you think and we have the same issue on our side, so I'm going to ask myself the same question in a second for public adjusters as a whole. How often do you think the IA is given access to the actual policy?
That's a really good question. It all depends on the carrier. There were very few times that I was given full access to the policy, which, there's three parties here. There's the IA, there's the staff adjuster, and then there's the desk adjuster. So the way I understood it for most of my carriers, they wanted me to go out, look at the claim, assess for loss-related damages, not the anyways, I won't say that. The loss-related damages, direct physical damage covered, caused by covered loss, and give them my best assessment of those damages via an estimate. And they would give me the endorsements, and that was it. A lot of times. So the exact policy language, I didn't know, but know enough about insurance to know that the rotted trim on your house that you drive by, you walk by every day, is probably just a maintenance issue.
I mean, there's definitely some things that you could state are obvious from an insurance policy standpoint, but I can tell you, and again, we have the exact same issue on our end where most public adjusters don't review the policy either. But I think that's a major mistake on both ends, really, because policies today are very, very different from one policy to the next.
Absolutely.
Very few of them conform to the same ISO policies that most of us were taught about when we got our licensing. And a lot of the continued education courses that we have pertain to the ISO forms that the policies that we're actually using don't stick to. And so there are assumptions that are made on both sides without reviewing the policy that something is or isn't covered. In reality, there's very intricate differences from one to the next that can make something covered that normally isn't, or not covered that normally is. So it is a little bit disheartening to hear that you don't often get a copy of the policy. Sounds like you might just get renewal type policies or deck pages with the endorsements that are attached to it.
Yeah, the only time I ever got the actual policy is when I had draft authority, and so go ahead.
Did they train you on how to interpret that policy when you had the draft authority?
Yeah, I had to go through a lot of. There were a lot of tests and training to make sure that I could understand and interpret the policy. I didn't like it. I didn't like it.
You don't like interpreting policy, or didn't like those classes because they were boring as hell?
The classes and the test, but also it's difficult. So these DAs and these other adjusters have the ability to hide behind a phone, and it's difficult to go out. I know there's still carriers that do it, to go out and settle claims on site, especially when you have a PA or a contractor there that are just gonna go off the handle when you disagree with them. So I didn't like doing that because of the examples that I was given. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. I mean, there's so much in insurance policies that really clearly they're not written in plain language.
No.
So interpretation from one to the next might be very, very different. And it being contract of adhesion, you're supposed to give the benefit to the policyholder, but more often than not, when I'm arguing policy language and I can see that there is clearly multiple ways to interpret something, either broadly or narrowly, I would tend to apply the coverage in a way that benefits the policyholder the most.
Right.
And most of the arguments that we ended up having were against a carrier that wanted to interpret it in such a way that benefited them the most.
Absolutely.
And it would be hard for them to agree with our interpretation because it could have connotation for future claims on how it's supposed to be interpreted for every claim going forward. So it would be hard for them to make some kind of a blanket agreement that I could use against them in the future.
Right.
So if we're talking about a difference of opinion over how something is interpreted, a lot of times that ended up in an attorney's hands.
Right.
Which is unfortunate.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is did it get put back the same way it was before? That's the biggest. There are 1,000 ways to skin a cat. and how did we get there? Did we
In
take
reality,
steps?
we're not really even doing that anymore anyway. If we're follow me on this real quick, Dan. And policies used to say that we will repair or replace the damaged dwelling. And then they started changing over to we will repair or replace the damaged part of the dwelling. And now most policies say we will repair or replace the damaged component of the dwelling. And so if you have a component to something, let's go with roof, just because you and I met mostly for roof claims. If you're replacing a shingle because the shingle's damaged, that's the component that's damaged. If you're replacing that and the coverage is on a component level such as that, now you're talking about a replacement with new materials instead of a repair of a roof where you're replacing a small portion of a roof as a system where it's still a repair because you're replacing a small portion of it. Now we're talking about replacement of the covered component. A little bit different in how that would be applied. So a replacement would be replacing with something that's new. If that's how policies are starting to be applied, can we really talk about bringing someone back to a pre-loss condition when even the components is a whole new thing? It's a betterment policy, if anything else. Replacement cost puts them in a better situation than they were before the loss.
Yeah, no. I mean, in a roof situation, absolutely not. The insured is getting a very expensive upgrade to their home.
Yeah, it is. Maybe people take advantage of that too much.
I agree. I think maybe they do. There are obviously legitimate claims out there. There are obviously people that have legitimate damages that legitimately need help. You know, one of the biggest things that kind of got me was people, not the lay person, like the average person knows absolutely nothing about their policy. They don't even know who it is that their insurance is with because they got it as a bundle when they got their mortgage company. The biggest thing.
Story there.
What's that?
Arguably, I know you could argue I'm a policy expert. I would argue it, and I could be challenged on that, maybe, possibly. But when I purchased my own policy for the last house that I bought, I went online, one of those online agencies, and I filled out everything, and I asked for ordinance and law coverage, and I asked for additional other structures coverage and additional coverage C, personal property to be increased for certain things. And I scheduled certain items and I went through everything. And I know what a policy is limited to that I need to add additional coverages for.
Right,
I added in additional water damage. I added in fungi, all the fun stuff.
Right.
And then it spits out something that says, okay, you qualify for the following coverage. I just spent all that time adding all that shit in. And I know now because I went back and I redid everything. It, at that point, said you qualify for a policy that covers the following perils. And it listed all these perils. And I purchased it. And I got a copy of the deck page. I bought an HO8 policy without realizing it. You can't get a copy of your policy until after you purchase it. I was buying an HO3. And I got an HO8.
Maybe you didn't have your contacts on and you thought it was an HO3.
No, I went through all this. I ended up saying I had to go actually go through it all. Back and I went through it all again. That statement that popped up, it said that because I had previous claims that hadn't dropped off yet, that I only qualified for a policy that had named perils for certain portions of it. I bought a named peril policy and didn't even know it. Anyway, if I can buy a policy like that without realizing it, how hard must it be for someone else to buy a policy?
No, I get that. I get that. What I'm saying is do some research. I'm pretty sure you can find out who's paying claims and who's not paying claims.
That's true.
I'm sure you can find out, usually publicity is bad. no matter what. Nobody wants to talk about who does a good job. They only want to talk about who does a bad job.
I thought there was no such thing as bad publicity.
Well, I mean,
You know what they say?
For carriers, if you go online and you're like, oh, well, these people never pay claims, blah, blah, blah. People move to other carriers, but I'm talking about the people that literally get offered a policy as a package with their mortgage and have no idea what it's covering, if it's covering anything or not. They never even look at it. I've gone out to people's houses where they have an other structure that's as big as some people's houses, and they have $25,000 worth of other covered, other structures. I'm like, you're going to get like 3 walls and that's it.
Yeah.
I mean,
your agent sucks.
Yeah. It blows my mind. It blows my mind that you spend so much money. Anyways, what I'm saying is it's a consumer product. If a carrier sucks,
it's true. But it's easy for someone to feel comfortable and stick. It's almost like a relationship, a marriage that you're comfortable with, even though it's not the greatest marriage in the world. It's convenient. You've already got it. You don't have to go out and try to persuade another female of the species to do weird shit with you. You've already convinced this one person.
Your wife's watching. Did you settle?
I know. So if you've already you already got this coverage, but you didn't know what was in it until you bought it, you don't get a copy of the policy until after you spend the money.
Right.
Once you get it, you're supposed to then go, oh shit, I don't want this piece of shit. I want to give this up. So, but I mean, you have a good point. People should look at ratings. Go to the Department of Insurance website and see if there's a lot of complaints on them.
Yeah, I have a broker. And
yeah, my wife is definitely still watching.
Oh, I know he didn't. He would never shut up about you when we were out on claims together and how much he loves you and all this stuff. There you go.
It's completely true, Ashley. I swear.
I have a broker personally, and so she knows I was an adjuster. I know policy. When my renewal comes up, we have a long conversation. She tells me everything that's in my policy before I purchase it and what the limits are, or what it covers and doesn't cover. I mean, there are ways around what you're saying here. I mean, it's
well,
I'm not saying that I excuse a carrier for not indemnifying the policyholder.
No, that's not even the issue. Most of the time, the agents have no idea what they're selling, and they're making assumptions on what a policy covers and not. And they don't get copies of the guidelines more often than not. So agents are another issue, to be honest. There's another set of the bull that we talked about on the show, and whether or not an agent actually knows. I can't tell you how many times I've called an agent up, the licensed agent, and asked them for a full copy of the policy for someone so we can evaluate the coverages. And they sent me the deck page. And I said, no, this is just a deck page. I need a full policy with all of these forms on it. And they sent me the deck page again and said, this is a full policy. You're a licensed person. You have CE courses. How can you not know that this is not the policy? I need the whole policy, please. But, there is an issue. And I think it's very clear on both sides of the equation. The biggest issue, and you've said it, and I'm saying it about my side, the biggest issue that we have is a lack of education. And people on both sides make assumptions, and people on both sides need to have some clarity and hopefully the same information taught to both sides at some point so we can stop having so much animosity. There's absolutely no reason for us to fight each other.
I agree. There is absolutely no reason. We can have discussions. I mean, it does get harder the closer you get to writing that check. But the only thing that any of us can do is our job and do it well. Don't cut corners. I tell my adjusters all the time, because part of my job is training. Part of my job is reviewing. Part of my job is making sure that I present the best quality that we possibly can so that the insured gets indemnified and the carrier gets exactly what they want, and our deviations are very low at the end of the year. That's exactly what my job is. And so the more that I can teach my adjusters that need to be taught, there's some great adjusters out there that don't need any of my help. But there's definitely a lot of room for everybody to continue to learn, continue to keep their minds open to the possibility that all of us can be wrong, and all of us make mistakes. It's just, we're all human. I mean, it's what
I think that's true. And I've made those very comments in some of my classes where I say adjusters are also people. The fact that I have to say that sometimes sucks. These are people you're dealing with. You don't have to be a dick to them. They're doing their job. If you can understand that someone is doing their job and you're doing yours, I think it's easier to work together towards the same ends or the same means. And you can actually settle claims that way instead of fighting them on every little thing that's wrong as if they're doing it on purpose. If you fight them on everything, you're not going to get anywhere. Trying to find some common ground and work together to go to the same goal, there's going to be a little bit of compromise probably, but both sides can come to some kind of agreement.
I'll say this.
Let's be honest, PAs, you're not right about everything.
No, and neither are the adjusters. No. I'll say this. I think everybody on my team, all the guys and the girls and everybody in between, they all believe that they're putting forward their best product every time they write a claim. And it really stinks that I have to call them and say, this is hot garbage.
Shit. Daniel, I don't want you to get abused too much more, so I think we're gonna shut this down.
I haven't been abused yet. I haven't gotten a hard.
Well, I haven't posted the hard ones on there because some of these are really. It's apparent that they're going to be airing out some dirty laundry with other adjusters with you, and I want your management to allow you to come back.
Well, I just want everybody to know that I really appreciate Matt asking me here. I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and the few comments that were placed, I don't take anything personally. We all have experiences where we have just been abused and wronged, and insureds have been abused and wronged. We can't let that bleed over into the next one. We gotta take that next claim, look at it objectively, look at the facts, and present our findings as best as we possibly can to the insurance company, both sides.
So every claim is based on its own merits.
Thanks, Javier.
I really appreciate you being on. Took some balls to do that, by the way.
If it was anybody but Matt, I wouldn't have done it.
Well,
I would not. If it was anybody but Matt, I wouldn't have done it. You're a stand-up dude.
I am standing currently, which does help the case. I don't want to say what I was just saying. So it's not a good thing for me. My wife is watching.
You can whisper in my ear later tonight, okay?
I will definitely. Dan, hopefully we can be on again. I have a feeling this is going to be my most watched episode ever. So if you do end up coming back on, as large as your balls are now, they might need to be even larger if you do come back. But please don't let that stop you.
I will gird my loins.
Gird your loins like a pro. All right, I'm going to kick you off and sign off on this thing. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Matt.
That was Daniel Namirr. He is the manager of a TPA firm, an IA firm, and he handles a lot of claims. And I've dealt with him over the years in the field, and he's one of my favorite adjusters that I ever dealt with, mostly because he is reasonable and open-minded, and you can have a discussion with him where you disagree without him getting pissed off, and he can have a discussion with me the same way. And I think if you treated every claim that way with the adjusters that you meet with, you'll actually have better success with your claims, regardless if you're a contractor or a PA. Understand that they can make mistakes. They're allowed to. They're people. They're humans. If they make a mistake and they extend coverage, they can't withdraw it. There are rules that they have to abide by. But overall, if you treat it as if it was an honest mistake, you'll probably get a lot further with them and be able to settle claims for your clients a little bit easier. So this is a Listen to This Bull show. We don't get paid to do this show. So if you would like to help support us, you go to our website, bull.com. You can make a donation. You can even buy shirts like this one. And that helps us buy all the equipment necessary to keep this thing running and keep our subscription with all the software that we have to do to make this work. We encourage you to do so. And I'm going to invite Dan back on here, and hopefully we can start pushing the conversation in that way so we can have more people like Dan on the show as often as possible. There is an opportunity for us to have another podcaster named Matt, who has one T in his name, who does a show called Adjuster TV. He wanted to have a discussion with me, a little argument back and forth about functional damage, something I didn't even go into with Daniel, because that'll be a 4-hour conversation, I'm sure. Anyway, in a couple of weeks, I've got someone from the IICRC Council that's going to be on here. That's on the 14th. Next week, Tuesday at 6 p.m. Every Tuesday we're on here. And next week, I've got... That's today. Hang on. There we go. I've got a guy named Jeremy who does training for another podcaster. And he's one of those guys that can boil down every problem into a very small, succinct statement. Something I wish I had that superpower for. It's actually really cool. So that'll be a hell of a lot of fun having Jeremy on here. And I'm going to make fun of him constantly for the hell of it, because it'll be great. So I'll see you guys next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Go to listentothisbull.com and help us support the show. Buy a shirt. Show everybody that you deal with bull. I'll see you guys later.